two questions, rather a two-pronged question that is coming in my head. Anant, if you want to take this forward, what she said. Um, I think it was interesting that she kept talking about herself till she suddenly diverged and landed up talking about the data, which is something that I find very intriguing in today's times. We are all together in our aloneness, as a philosophical line goes. Um, is what she is the point that she's making, that you as a person have a choice to influence, to start with your own life, but if you contribute to a certain mindset, not only will you be able to contribute to your own self, but make a, since she gave the example of an app, make something which is more of global repercussions also possible, if you stick to finding your uh, strength within this challenging time. Does the buck stop with us to start with?
Okay. So to backtrack a bit and to address what I spoke of earlier, in terms of whether it is your personality as an optimist or a pessimist that is influential, I think an important facet that overrides this personality trait is what you see, what is the circumstances you find yourself in. Since there is emphasis on values in this conversation of ours, it would be unethical of me to ignore the fact that it is a luxury for us to debate optimism and pessimism here, when for majority of the people in this world, having a laptop, being able to afford a laptop and having a Wi-Fi connection to make the best of your time during this pandemic, that's still a luxury. So as much as the buck stops with you, it is dependent on you to acknowledge your privilege at a certain point, but it's not so easy for majority of the people living in this world. So I think that's my take on this, whether we consider ourselves either positively approaching or negatively approaching the situation.
Okay. So, if Usha were to persist on this point that is made, uh, would you still hold on to the fact that irrespective of everything, you are privileged enough to have the laptop and the Wi-Fi connection, make the most of it instead of sitting and, um, say for example, we continue what he said, we acknowledge our privilege to start with. We also uh, we also worry. There are times, I'm sure all of us have tried to do a bit for the causes that are possible through, again, through the same internet and the same Wi-Fi, since we personally can't go and uh, do any kind of noble deed physically, thanks to the lockdown. Uh, so would you still persist on what you said, that we need to make the best of the situation that we find ourselves in, or else would you change your mind considering the aspect that he's gotten?
Well, I recognize how privileged I am. And I think more than anything else, on a day-to-day basis, I have to check that privilege, not just with my peers when I'm talking to them, but with anybody. And I know this may come as a shock, or it might not seem like something that a lot of people say, but I'm more privileged than most others, even in my own socioeconomic strata. And that's because I come from parents who are very free thinking. That itself gives me so much more leeway than most other people do. And so I recognize that while I'm sitting over here being extremely positive and extremely optimistic about my future, that is something that I can do because I have support around me to tell me to do so. But that's not necessarily something that only comes from that space. It comes from the space where if I look at the negatives, I'm not doing justice to any of it. My privilege no longer matters in a situation where privilege itself guarantees me only certain comforts, such as a laptop or a bed or a home. Now, these are comforts that not everybody can enjoy. But if those are your basic necessities in a lockdown, and if you start looking at them going, I'm lucky and other people don't have it, and so I should feel bad, I'm not making the most of my life. because that is not the most that I can do right now. I'm playing a longer game. I'm playing a longer minefield of chess. Today I'm more privileged, but tomorrow, maybe not. And if I can do something to change that right now, tomorrow, or over the span of a few days, span of a few years, that is what's going to be of true value. And that isn't something that's going to stop during a lockdown. Because our issues with the world, our problems, they don't just stop. They sometimes get over amplified by things like the lockdown. And when that happens, people do rise up to the occasion. But more importantly, there is not a systemic change or a systemic improvement that happens overnight, regardless. So in the next 10 years, what can I do with my life to make sure that this privilege that I have is not just mine? That is my perspective to this optimism. So today, yes, I feel burdened by how much comfort I have around me. But that is not gone to waste. That's why I'm optimistic.
Okay, I will, instead of going to Anant, I'll stick to what you just said. I want to probe a little more. Um, is it good things to say on camera, or do you really feel uh, the fight inside? Because it's a very vulnerable place to be in. I want to give it a context so that even if when Anant kicks it forward, he also knows what I'm talking about. Um, we've also lost a lot of things with our privilege, our freedom to move around, a lot of uh, political hassles happening, law and order problems, and various kind of issues happening all over the world, not only in India. Uh, we've always been, there is a word called scaremongering that is happening all along, which is eating into our minds. You cannot go for a walk without thinking what is happening. Or if you touched a place or you shook hands. I'll give you a funny example. Me and this friend used to have a lot of chai whenever we met. So we met after a long time. I actually made chai from my place and went downstairs, and we were both having chai. And we cracked a joke, and we were just about to high-five each other. And halfway during the high-five, we realized we cannot. And we just turned. And it was such a, I don't know, it's such a simple privilege. It's not even a privilege. You just, everyday life. And it's taken away from you. So yeah, to come back to the question, is it easy for you to say this because you are saying this on camera and it's easy to talk? Or have you had conflicts within where you questioned yourself? How do you bring out the best in the situation? Because the situation doesn't seem to go away. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see any end to it as of even right now. So how do you, and if you did, what was it that gave you this optimistic point of view?
Well, it's very simple. I started out the lockdown feeling just like everybody else, like all my plans got ruined. And those were plans that I felt were privileged even before they got ruined. Because if other people around me said, I'm going to take a year off, travel the world, work, and figure out what I'm going to do for my master's, their parents would probably look at them and go, don't do that, it's not sensible. You need to work harder and study harder. My parents said, okay. That simple okay itself was so much privilege. And from that perspective itself, if I looked at everything, I said, there's no point in me being sad. There's no point. Because come hell, high water, roof burns down, whatever happens, tomorrow I'll pick up the pieces and I will start again. Whatever it is that I'm doing. Because the long-term goal for me with whatever I've studied so far has also been to make an economic change, to make a social change. That has been a signifying, unifying theme with all that I've studied, at least in the past 5 years. And in those 5 years, I've learned that this is what I want to do. So regardless of where I am, what I'm doing, if this is my goal, today I'll push it a little bit. Something I may do, just tutor a neighborhood child, because that's the most I can do right now. but I am playing the long term goal. I am playing long term chess, where I'm eventually going to be the king or queen, making those decisions. And that is a personal dream and a personal goal that I wish to achieve. And so if I have to do that, I can't sit around on my butt and feel sad for myself or cry or feel despair or waste time on these emotions.
Okay.
So
Anand,
it's very much like, there is dhanda to be done. I have to do it regardless of what I'm thinking of.
okay. Anand, the way she spoke gave me a question. Irrespective of the situation that we are in, I remember I practiced Vipassana meditation, and there was a question put up to the principal teacher. What about world peace? So he says to have a forest of green trees, each tree has to be green and healthy. So, putting the context, the way she spoke about her dream, would you think that is a good answer to have that while one keeps one's perspective um, a little more 360-degree, knowing what others are going through, trying to do little things? She did mention in the end one little thing, maybe I can teach a kid, or we've been doing some food donation and some animal care donation, whatever we can sitting at our homes. Uh, not that it makes us happy. There's so much more there can be done, and the stories are far more bigger. But within this context, I would side with her only on this one little point. This entire values workshop started because it was a lockdown. I could do it far more easily. I intended to do workshops on ground, and that would have taken a lot more preparation, lot more people to organize. So I would want to see it from that perspective. How would you see it? Does the individual matter? When we said the buck stops with you, is that a way of internalizing a external situation and then slowly walking towards a middle ground of sorts?
I think you're absolutely right that it will be necessary to approach a middle ground of sorts, because at the end of the day, your actions are all that you can be accountable for. Whether or not you want to create a grand change in the society that you see, whether now or later, not specific to this pandemic, but things may not ideally work out your way all the time. You may give it your 100%, you may take all possible precautions, but there still may be a chance for things to go haywire. So the middle ground is probably finding your own mental peace, where you reassure yourself that you've done everything in your power, but you also don't resign yourself to the fact that even if I give it my best, things may go wrong. You need to give it your best for the sake of giving it your best. Probably that's the best way to put it, irrespective of the results. Because, and as you said, with the example of world peace, every tree needs to be green for in order metaphorically in order for that objective to be achieved. So even one rotten apple may threaten to spoil the whole basket. So it is, I'd see your individuality as giving you that sort of agency where um, even if there are rotten apples existing alongside, it is within your control whether or not you want to be rotten as them. I
Okay.
think that's the beauty that comes with individual agency.